Hey there, horror movie tea sippers.
The following podcast episode will contain spoilers for the movie we are about to review. If you have not seen the movie and do not wish to have anything ruined prematurely, please do not continue to watch or listen until you have seen the movie.
And welcome to the Horror Movie Tea Podcast.
Today we are re-recording and covering Nope. In our backstock of recordings, out of like the 30, we've just lost one, and knock on wood, that's going to be the only ones that we lose.
Better be.
Yeah, but yeah, Jess might blow up. but
Yeah.
I might too, though. To be fair, we're just slowly losing our sanity. It's okay.
Just a bit.
But before we go into the review, let's grab our cups and talk about tea. So, Plum Deluxe was kind enough to have us try more tea. So I am drinking the Plum Deluxe Calm Chamomile Bloom Herbal Tea. It's got green green rooibos, chamomile, rose, lavender, lemongrass, and lemon balm. And I'm using a merch mug that it's reversed, unfortunately, for the OBS, but it says tea first and then scream. So I honestly, whenever I got this mug from Teespring, I was really impressed with the pattern. Like, we did freaking good on this one, I gotta say.
Well, thank you. I worked hard on that.
Yeah, Jess did real good. But what are you drinking today?
I am drinking from the mug that V got us.
Shameless plug to
And
V.
yes. And I'm drinking Bigelow's chamomile, vanilla, and honey herbal tea. And it's got chamomile, natural vanilla, and honey flavors with other natural flavors and licorice root. So we were along the same lines today.
Yeah, it's like I saw that chamomile tea. I'm like, ooh, right.
Yeah.
But and I don't know if you noticed, but Plum Deluxe actually freaking camera. Well, actually, it's Discord's fault this time. They changed up their packaging. I actually really
Yeah,
like
it
it.
looks nice.
Yeah, it's more neutral, but
Yeah.
I like it. But thank you so much to Plum Deluxe for continuing to allow us to do what we love. And for our
Sorry
for,
to cheer.
for our tea sippers out there, brew yourself a cup of tea, sit back, relax, and we hope you enjoy the review. So, for Jordan Peele's Nope. The residents of an isolated gulch in California find themselves under attack by a unique UFO-like creature. That one I actually
Yep.
modified from IMDb, so it's in my own
I
words
mean
this time.
that's it. That's
Yeah, yeah,
that's the movie.
yeah. IMDb. I had the summary from them, but anyways, for entertainment, I will say that since this is the second recording of this movie, I watched it for a second time. And I will say the first time I watched it, I was pretty disappointed, especially comparing this movie to Get Out and Us. However, watching it a second time, I definitely appreciate it a lot more, but can still see quite a few flaws that aren't really found in his last two films. So for entertainment, I give this a 7. Um, I like that the characters are sympathetic. I know in the beginning the sister at first comes off as uncaring, but you actually eventually learn that there's a situation where she was supposed to be given a horse, and instead her father trained the horse with her brother. So I feel like that's kind of the moment where, because it's like she's off doing her own thing,
And it was used on a set
Yeah.
for like a movie. So it wasn't given to her. It was
Yeah.
basically given to movie production.
Yeah, so I think from that situation, it's safe to infer that at that moment she felt like, her father was maybe putting the business in front of her. Even like maybe her brother felt like maybe her father favored her brother over her, and that could have been the pivotal moment where she decided she didn't want to uh, be a part of the family business. So it's like I really do like the characters, how like there's a few characters that at first you're like, I'm not sure if I like them, but then they end up growing on you when they dig a little deeper and you figure out a little bit more about their character. Um, I also found it kind of interesting that uh, Ricky or Jupe is is what he's mainly known as, used his trauma with Gordy to capitalize on Jupiter's claim. Like he essentially used his trauma to make a fortune off of it, which I thought was interesting. But it's like with
It's definitely unusual.
Well, it's like with a lot of, if you think about it, the alien is supposed to be, and this is interesting. So I actually found out that the alien, whenever it goes from its UFO form to the more like the second form where it's more like flowy,
Mhm.
that actually is inspired by an old uh camera design. Um where it's like you've got the flash and then the mouth part is like the lens. Um, so it literally is supposed to represent the camera of Hollywood. And so I find it interesting because essentially Jupe is capitalizing on his trauma, but in a lot of ways Hollywood uses people trauma to capitalize on themselves. So I feel like there's some parallels there potentially. Um, And let's see. Yeah, and this is kind of coming back to some stuff I had mentioned in the other recording, but it's like I had found an article where they were stating that the movie is really about Hollywood, how not only are black people forgotten and not given enough credit in Hollywood, but how like it spits people out when it's done with them. But I feel like since it doesn't just show black people, also shows like the cameraman, um, of course Jupe, the fat, and then just like regular um viewer or regular the people at the,
Audience members.
yeah, it's like audience members, how it just ate all of them and spit them back out.
Mhm.
I think is kind of interesting, and very telling on what uh, Jordan Peele feels about Hollywood. Um, sorry, I should have. Okay, okay. um, sorry, my brain's in
Real
other places.
ADD brain
I know,
today.
I know. So my more critique though of the movie is the different title cards. Now, someone theorized that because Jordan Peele, like his favorite movie, apparently, or one of his favorite movies, is The Shining, and someone thinks that the title cards from The Shining, where it's like each day of the week as it's progressing, Jordan Peele is like, oh, we are going to put a name of a different horse. And so it's kind of like a reflection of The Shining. But to me, and even rewatching it and understanding how the stories connect together, it still kind of kills the flow of the movie for me. And especially like in each section will be parts where it really gets going and you're like, oh, I want to know more. And then it cuts and then it moves to a section that's like a lot slower paced. And
Yeah, it makes it choppy.
yeah, so it kind of goes a back and forth between like super exciting and engaging to like, can we skip this part? um, but I will say, like, even though overall this isn't a very scary movie, It did have some very eerie moments, like the fake aliens in the barn, um, or the alien over the house where you hear the screams suddenly stop, and then the rain of blood. That was a good scene. Like, ooh. Um, and just like overall, it's just an interesting take on an alien movie. Um, and there's so much symbolism in this movie. Like, for example, Jupiter's Claim. Jordan Peele actually came out and said that Jupiter's Claim actually symbolizes how Hollywood uh, tones down and sanitizes old Western times. Um, when it was a very brutal time, they make it seem like oh, it's such a
Fun.
yeah. And then there's just so much minute detail in the movie reinforcing the themes and the symbolism and stuff like that. Like I'm obviously not going to go over every single thing, but just keep your eyes very watchful in this movie and you'll see a lot of parallels. I also found it interesting that the alien and Gordy, the monkey, had a lot of parallels in how like you can't look at them in the eyes, otherwise you'll get killed. The fact that it's like such a rare incident and it causes like terrible tragedy along with it. So it's just like it's a very like multi-layered movie, but also so simple at the same time. It's just ah. Anyways, so it's like I do like the fact that's a different take on an alien movie, and I can definitely appreciate the symbolism, but comparing it to I hate comparing it, but it's like we have to have some sort of um bar, you know? So comparing it to Get Out and Us, this just didn't quite hit the mark to me. So it's like I definitely feel like it's worth the watch, or a couple of watches, but it's I'm probably not going to come back to it very often. I would go to one of the his other movies first.
Yeah, I definitely agree. As far as this movie is concerned, I enjoyed watching it and I have a lot of fun watching it, but rating it as a horror movie, it gets a lower score for me than if I was rating it as like a sci-fi movie, like just straight science fiction. As a horror movie, I'd give it a 6.5. It's not scary at all. There's some oh crap moments, but honestly, for the most part in this movie, I was laughing. Like it's a fun movie.
It is a
They've
fun
got a
movie.
they've got a lot of humor in it. They've got a lot of relatable scenes. They've got I mean, even their drama bit is very relatable and real,
Yeah.
but it doesn't like hit super hard of making you want to cry or being super uncomfortable. It's just everyday life kind of stuff.
I know someone
Um,
described this movie as a neo-Western, and I can definitely see where they're
I
coming
could
from
see
on
that.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the scenes that hits the hardest for me is just the hopelessness that the main character feels when he's trying to help his dad
Yeah, that was
after the freak incident of a nickel being shot into the guy's skull right behind his eye and
yeah.
him bleeding out in his truck as he's trying desperately to get him to uh, some kind of clinic or ER or something, anything that's close by that can help him. And you can tell, like, in the drive there, it's not good. He's not
Yeah.
doing well.
And I love how they also make it a point to show how he's continuously trying to keep his dad's legacy alive. And
Yes.
it's heartbreaking because it's like at that point in time, his dad's been gone for about 6 months, and just their farm is falling apart around him, and he's doing everything he can to try and keep the
Mhm.
family business going. Because I mean, it's not just their legacy, which is obviously really important because that's a huge part of the movie. But it's also like
It's their
what was
livelihood.
yeah, and it was what was so important to their
Mhm.
dads is like if they lose that, then what else do they have of their father?
Yeah.
So it there's an extra layer of like sadness and heartbreak there. It's like you can
Well,
feel the
it's not
desperation.
just that, it's the fact that he doesn't really have time to fully grieve. He has to
Yeah,
keep the ranch going. It's just him working on it. They never show any ranch hands or anyone else on that ranch. There's no other help. It's just him. So he's isolated out there, except when his sister occasionally comes by, and it seems pretty rare, and the horses, and that's it. So, and he has to keep that business going, which is hard to do anyway under the best of circumstances. It's a tough business, and there's a hell of a lot of competition.
yeah,
So he can't afford to stay out of the game for long. So he's dealing with his dad's death alone as best he can while trying desperately to keep everything running. And it's just too much. It's
yeah,
too much. So that's just heartbreaking.
yeah.
Um, those are the scenes that really hit me the hardest. I did appreciate them showing that in the scene where you see the daughter's horse, or what was supposed to be the daughter's horse, being trained. The brother recognizes the situation. It sucks, but he gets both sides of it. And he wants to at least acknowledge the sister and how much it sucks for her. So while the dad is 100% focused on training the horse, the brother still looks back at the sister and acknowledges her and what she's going through.
I also found it really interesting too how like whenever the brother and sister are talking about their father and the memories of him, it's obvious that, you know, he wasn't the perfect father, but
Yeah.
how each of them dealt with that differently. Like OJ was more like, you know, that's how it was, just
Mhm.
kind of like accepting it and just not really trying to fight with it, while the sister was like more like processing it, like that really sucked, and like trying to like having to acknowledge how crappy uh that particular situation was, and that's how she was processing
Yeah. That being said, though, the humor in this movie
it.
is just top notch. Like the interactions between the main characters, the siblings, and also with the tech guy,
Yes.
who is honestly a little pushy
Oh yeah. That's putting it
and
nicely.
just a bit like so nosy and all up in their business and just like invites himself into their situation to I know it's mostly to help, but also they told you to stay out of it, dude.
And he's over here looking at their camera feed without them
Yeah.
knowing, and like, yeah.
Yeah. And after they had already told him don't, like that's an invasion of privacy. Just, offhand, that's one thing wrong with it. There's so many things wrong with it, but that's one of the biggest. But it is still funny watching him interact with the sibling. And when the kids from Jupiter's Claim try to prank OJ, and he sees this stuff, and he's just like, "Nope," and backs up, like, "Not today."
Perfect reaction.
Yeah, accurate. Um, little surprised he didn't bring a gun or some kind of weapon with him because, again, that is their livelihood, and he doesn't have many horses left. But, we'll get to a lot of that in the realism. Um, his reaction though otherwise was pretty spot on and hilarious and relatable. And the paparazzi or investigative journalist camera guy that came in from TMZ, um, that made sense. There's a lot of stuff going on with Jupiter's claim. It makes sense that there's going to be people asking neighbors nearby or residences nearby what happened, if they noticed anything, if they had heard anything, anything like that. So, and not giving a crap that he was on private property and driving through it or anything. But the humor, the humor when he hits the dead zone and flies off the motorcycle
The ultimate karma.
with a little squeal gets me every single time I watch this movie. Every single time. I always have to back it up at least once just to rewatch that one scene.
Oh my goodness.
So whoever played that part, they never actually showed their face. Top notch there. That was wonderful. Great job. Top notch.
I also found it interesting. I didn't exactly understand it, but it could be like some symbolism thing I wasn't getting. But like how the guy was sitting there injured and he was just so obsessed with like, are you filming this? Are you filming this? Like,
Because it sells.
yeah. Like all the way up
Pain,
to his death.
injury, and death sells,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So it makes sense. The fact that they never showed his face was another device that they used because he's a faceless cameraman.
That's true. Well,
He's one of many paparazzi or investigative journalists,
that's right.
and I understand that a lot of them would want to hide their face because the way they go about things a lot of times is not the friendliest, and they could easily get some backlash, especially if people know who they are. So I get that, but also just the fact that there's so many out there and they're all vying for their spot, their 15 minutes of fame after they've gotten that one shot, their 2-minute clip
Yeah.
so of going viral. So I get it.
Well, and it wasn't you explaining about the cameras, and we're talking about how
Mhm.
like the fries guy like was looking at the footage without their permission. This might be me looking a little bit too deep, but I wonder if that could potentially um signify like uh celebrities where it's like they're constantly being watched even without their permission, and they have like
Possibly.
but yeah, like I said, that could be looking a little bit too deep
He
in it.
was being super nosy about it, like to the point of spying. So he in and of itself became kind of a paparazzi almost. Um or stalker almost.
Yeah.
Very close. Um, but also I wonder if he was initially thinking if he got the footage first, if he could profit off of it.
Yeah. Yeah, like a
So,
lot of this movie is how to profit off of things, like how to profit off the horses, which is a little bit ironic how the father died with a coin in his head when he was selling horses to make money. Um, I'm sure that was not on purpose. Uh, the footage of the UFO being like, not just like the cameraman, like not just like, as a cameraman, this would be amazing to be able to get a shoot of an alien, but the fame and fortune along with it, and just a lot of repeated themes in this movie.
Yeah. So, all in all, very entertaining to watch. It is one that, if you're not that into super scary movies, this would be a good one. It's a lot of fun to watch with a group, just watching the siblings snipe at each other.
Yeah, I feel like this would be a good movie to watch with a group of people that likes to watch fun movies, but also love films in general and likes critically thinking about
Yeah,
films. Because that way, it's like you can laugh at the fun parts, but then you can have a discussion about like the symbolism and metaphors in the movie too.
definitely. You want to go ahead and move on to the realism?
Yeah, I took so long in entertainment because I don't got squat for real. I couldn't think of
I was
anything.
wondering, you were going on and on
I
for
couldn't
entertainment.
think of anything for realism. Like, I'm like a lot of like there's parts of it that I don't find realistic. Like, I find it a little bit weird that the alien itself wouldn't would be transforming into a ship, and then like the way that transforms and stuff, like that didn't make a whole lot of sense. Like
I
why that shape
mean,
in particular.
well, it's an alien, so I didn't count off for that. It's more compact and aerodynamic the other way.
That's
When
true.
it's more flowy, it's a lot more intimidating.
Yeah,
And it was at that point perceiving threats and
that's
was
true.
being very territorial. So
That's true.
that made sense to me. Um, how it generated a cloud around itself
Yeah.
that never changed or moved
Like the
was something that I didn't quite get.
Yeah, see, they kinda trick you because in that scene, it makes it seem like it's more like a typical alien where it's like, "Oh, they have the technology to camouflage themselves," but then you
Yeah,
find out that it's actually an animal. And so, yeah, that doesn't really fit the narrative of it being an animal. That more fits the aliens have, like
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
and I also understand that in the animal kingdom, many different types of animals find ways to camouflage themselves. That I understand. But the fact that the cloud around it never changed at all, when clouds are supposed to be water vapor that are constantly changing, like, it never changed shape,
Yeah.
ever. So, that made no sense.
Yeah. Um But, like, the way that, Jupe, like, capitalizes on his own trauma, because it's like, it's kinda like it's like
That makes sense, yeah.
it's like money heals all wounds if you have enough of it, you know? You can at least afford therapy, right? But,
Yeah,
or, like, and then especially, like, the dynamic between the brother and the sister and how they have very different experiences of their father and how they process, how they think of the family business and how they, like, process, like, uh,
their
not the
grief.
yeah. Um, I'd say the least realistic character is probably the fries guy. Just how, like, over the top he is. I mean, he is obviously, like,
I
an
mean,
enthusiast, but
I can still kind of see that personality type.
yeah.
So he was still somewhat realistic. I feel like they probably would have threatened him with some kind of lawsuit at least once.
This is random, but did you notice that the Fry's Electronics, that store theme was UFO?
Yeah.
Uh, but, ah, yeah, there's nothing too terribly unrealistic. It's mostly the logistics of the alien itself that I can think of. But like a this movie just makes my brain mush when it comes
Other things.
to it's like my brain I can either think of it as an artful film or a realistic film, and it's hard for me to cross the two. So I on this review I
Cross
went
the
all art.
streams.
So um yeah, so for realism, I'll I'll throw out I'll give it a 2.5.
Okay, well, I wasn't gonna be that
Okay,
harsh,
I'll give
but
it a 3.
yeah, I
3.5.
was gonna give it a 3. I was gonna give it a 3. The interactions themselves are very realistic. The fact that OJ has to keep that business going, even though he is trying to grieve, but just doesn't have time to grieve and process it and everything. He's just had this business dumped on him out of nowhere before he was ready.
Yeah.
That's accurate. The sister having like 20 side gigs and side hustles, just trying to figure out what she wants to do, but stay away from the business enough that she's trying to separate herself from her past trauma and not have to deal with something that brings her a lot of frustration and emotional pain. That makes sense. The film industry not wanting to listen to them at first when she first calls the camera guy about making a documentary, quote unquote. Um, that seems legit. Him having to sell horses in order to keep everything going and just barely even at that. And then Jupiter's claim, you don't find out until later that the horses are gone. They have been fed to the thing. But they've been taking his livelihood when he had the assumption that he was able to buy them back in the future. Like that was his understanding, was that he was basically loaning the horses to them for money with the intention of buying them back. And he was feeding them to the alien.
Yeah, like, of course I didn't, notice it, like, the first time around, but the second time around, I saw Jupe like, "Oh, crap, he's talking about buying the horses back," and then he's like, "Oh, yeah, the thing that you're interested? Yeah, let's go talk about that."
Well, it wasn't just that. In one of the scenes, if you have the subtitles on, you can barely hear it unless you have the sound turned way, way up. But you can actually hear, like, in the very, very, very far off distance at night during one of the first scenes of the alien being there and OJ experiencing this stuff, you can hear Jupe practicing the speech that he gives right before the alien shows up and eats all of the audience members and his family and himself.
You wanna know a crazy thing that I had, no idea until I watched a video and they talked about it? So the ordeal with Gordy took 6 minutes and 13 seconds, and whenever he would do the show with the alien, it was at 6:13 every Friday. I was like, "Ah, that's crazy."
That makes sense.
Like, essentially, like, someone's theory was, like, Jupe, since he was able to capitalize on his trauma with Gordy, that he, uh, was essentially figuring out is like, "Oh, if I know how to, uh, handle you know, one animal, let me capitalize on this other animal." Which is, like, I can see the parallels, but I don't know. It's like I don't necessarily know if he knew or realized how dangerous the alien was.
I don't think he did because in the scene with Gordy, the chimp never tried to harm him,
Yeah.
not once. In fact, he and the chimp were fairly close on the show, and they had a special thing between them. They did like the exploding fist bump thing.
Yeah.
And the chimp was trying to do that with him right before they killed the chimp.
Yeah.
So the chimp had, as far as we can tell, no intention of harming him. He didn't perceive Jupe as a threat.
Well, and it's because he never looked at him in the eyes. And that's a
Yeah.
repeating theme throughout the movie. It's like
Mhm.
with the horses and then the alien and then
Yeah.
Gordy. Um
But he didn't follow the rules with the alien. He thought
yeah.
he had everything figured out and he just wants the horses. He doesn't want us. So it's perfectly fine to have every single person in the area looking right at it. This is fine, and we can capitalize on it, make money, and make a profit. Yeah, no. That's it was not a good idea. He made a very bad move that cost him, his family, and a whole bunch of other people's lives. So, the horse was the only smart one. They're very, very empathetic creatures, and they're more intelligent than people give them credit for, and that horse was like, "Nah, this is not a good idea, bro." And just stayed exactly where he was, covered in the box, and, refused to go out there. It's like,
He's
"There's a
like the box
predator
is
out there,
safer.
I ain't leaving."
Uh,
Even if it's a clear box, I ain't leaving. Um, I don't know how it could pick up all of the fans and leave most of the items and the horse when it was supposed to be like a huge tornado-like event,
mhm.
basically,
Yeah.
or vacuum type event.
Yeah.
If it is supposed to be like a tornado, which it did revolve much like one and have suction like one, it didn't rip anyone apart in the event itself. It just sucked them up. I also don't understand how it could cause all of the electronics to suddenly die, but be able to come back as soon as it was out of range.
Well, and then like which electronics died was kind of like the rules
It
on
was
that.
all. Yeah.
Yeah. It was
It
like
was all electronics.
and then battery devices.
Yes, and batteries. Like they said it just cut off.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. If it dies when it gets close enough, then there's something messing with it and there would be actual damage to the devices, I would think, like an EMP,
Mhm.
which would fry them completely and they would not turn back on.
Yeah. And I'm also
And
kind
if
of
it was draining the batteries, then you would have to then charge them again for them to come back on.
mhm.
So for everything to just work perfectly fine when it got out of range, that it didn't make sense.
Well, I also kind of am curious how the alien causing the loss of power relates to it supposed to represent Hollywood. Because I
No idea.
because it's like at first I was thinking about it while we were while I was rewatching the movie. I'm like, well, like in a theater, you're not supposed to have your cell phone on, your lights are off, or the lights are off. I'm like, well, that doesn't exactly fit. So maybe
I'm
it
sure
could,
there's something else,
yeah,
or it could just be that they thought it was a cool idea, or like you have to pay attention to it. There's nothing else to pay attention to. That's the only thing to watch in the area.
yeah.
Um, but yeah. I also found it a little odd how arbitrary the things it could digest was. Like they made it seem like it could only process organic matter, but it's not throwing out clothes or anything.
Yeah, it's
Only
like
like small keys, coins.
yeah, because it's like if it was cotton clothing, then that's one thing, but if it's polyester, that's
Yeah,
plastic.
most of us wear something with at least a little bit of polyester.
Yeah.
most normal people. Um, that's just what's available,
Yeah.
honestly.
It's the tends to be the cheapest,
It
honestly.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and most readily available. So I
That's a
doubt in a
very good
crowd
point.
that big, everyone was wearing 100% cotton.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't oh my god. I didn't even think about that.
It's just very vague on the rules of what it can and cannot digest. I also don't understand how you could still hear all of the screaming all of the time.
Yeah, because it's like not only are they super high, but they're also inside of the thing and it's like contracting and
And
like
they're supposed to be killed fairly quickly. I mean, I understand in the scene with the guy that had the mic on him, you can hear it through the speakers
yeah.
for a good while. But when they're over the ranch and they're still screaming,
Yeah,
that makes no sense.
it's like why does it take so long? Cuz it's like you can hear it when it digests cuz it's like they all stop screaming at the same time. But then also like how fast cuz it's like it's in their it's they're in there, like, being prepared to be digested, and then whenever they all die, and then it spits out everything, it's like, are they already digested already? Like, that's in a second's time.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Also, in Jupe's act with the alien, he said every Friday,
Yeah,
like once a week, every week for 6 months. This has been going on, which implies that it doesn't need to feed that often.
yeah.
But the way the movie presented everything, this was happening like every night.
Yeah, the whole, like, timeline is kinda weird. Well, and then another thing too that I was whenever he was saying that it started 6 months ago, I'm like, "Oh, that's when the dad died." Then I started to think, do they ever explain why the alien came? I don't think they
No,
do. Like, it just randomly
it was
showed
just
up.
there. Yeah.
Like, that's just so
It
random.
chose that area,
It's like,
and
what
that's
would've
it. Yeah.
brought it to there, and why would it come in the first place? Because it's like, if an alien that needed to eat that much 'cause, to me, it is almost like a snake where it eats a bunch of food and then it's, like, good for a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like, why wouldn't it, like, go over a city or
So it could potentially be that it was drawn to that area just because of the horses mostly. Um,
or, like, bigger food?
bigger food and not a whole lot of light pollution. They were out in the middle of nowhere.
That's true. If it was like, depending on its intelligence, it might be like, "Oh, I won't be
It
spotted as
could.
easily."
And instead of moving on, like moving on to a different planet or a different area, it was such a um, favorable feeding ground that it decided to establish that as its own territory.
Yeah.
Because that happens in the wild too.
Yeah. I know
But
that's how a lot of predator where they all kinda have their own little sections of
mhm,
jungle
yes,
or forest or whatever.
yeah, it just seems a little random though. I do definitely see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like, I want to know the origin story of this
Don't
alien.
necessarily wanna know because I feel like if they go into that, then it's
It definitely
gonna
kills
kind of
the
ruin it.
yeah, yeah. Well, it also destroys the symbolism.
It does.
Yeah,
We don't need to know, it doesn't matter why it's there, it just matters that it is there and it's a problem.
yeah, yep,
But that's most of what I got. It's again, I don't understand him going out to the barn when they hear noises and all without a weapon, because that is your livelihood, but I'm also a Texas girl, so
And they're in California.
different state and different people, different family, different values. I would be coming for blood, but that's just me. He's shooting first and asking questions never. So,
Uh, yeah, like overall, I feel like it is a movie worth watching. At least watch it twice.
yeah,
So that way you can kinda like you already understand the flow of the movie and how it connects after the first watch. But
watch
besides
the scene with the squeal at least 3 times.
at least 3 times. Um, we need to make a GIF of that or something. Uh,
Great.
keep the noise with it. Uh,
It just pops.
but besides that, like, I'll probably rewatch this movie, like, once in a great while, but there's definitely
Yeah,
more other movies that have, like, layers like this I would choose first over this one.
yeah. It's a fun one, but it's also not a scary one, so
Yeah.
might be a good intro into, like, creature features for someone that's kinda interested in it and wants to dip their toes in,
Yeah.
but it's not scary. And he has some better works,
Yes, definitely.
so
But thank
but
you
the actors
for
all did a good job,
yes, as always.
as always. They always do an amazing job in his movies, I swear.
Mhm. But thank you for joining us today and let us know what you thought of the movie. If you'd like to recommend a movie, game, or tea, you can leave us a comment or join our Discord. And if you'd like to keep up to date with our content, you can find our link tree listed below.
If you'd like to support the podcast, please subscribe, like, and share our content. If you'd like to support us monetarily, we have a Teespring or a PayPal, or we have our affiliate link with Plum Deluxe available. It does not affect the price of the tea, it just allows us to continue to do what we love. And you can find all of the sites mentioned linked below. But until the next time, guys, stay safe and stay spoopy. Bye.
Bye.